A newly divorced single mom, Acamboy named Trevor, a murder that might even be a murder, and a title so bold that basically dares critics to review it and you to watch it. That is maximum pleasure guaranteed. I could not wait to bring this series for you guys. It is a series with half-hour episodes filled with, dark comedy about blackmail, grief, and even a little bit of youth soccer in the US. By the end of this video, you will understand why it might be one of the most smartest and tighter thriller Apple Plus has put out there in this whole 2026. Hi, I'm Paula, and this is a space where I talk about books, movies, series, and whatever I feel like sharing with you guys. Let's get into maximum pleasure guaranteed. Every twisted thriller needs someone who can hold tone in one hand and chaos in the other one. Apple went and got David Gordon Green. Now, if that name sounds familiar, it should if you were into indies and blockbuster movies. Green has spent decades living two separate filmmaking lives. One half of him quiet indie like George Washington and All the Real Girls, and the other half revived Halloween, the horror movie, and director studio comedies like Pineapple Express and The Sitter. That's not a split personality. That is the mixed resume this show actually needed. Or, maybe just a guy in Hollywood making ends meet to pay the bills at the end of the month. Who knows? Because maximum pleasure guaranteed isn't just a mystery. It's a mystery that stops to show you a cat video. Meow. It can cut from a woman spiraling into paranoia, straight into a genuinely funny bit about amateur digital tracking or hacking, who knows, and never once feeling like it's a broken series. That is Green's career condensed into one single show. He directed the premiere and executive produces the whole season. He also sets the visual language early. It is quick cuts, it is tight close-ups, a soundscape so packed with notifications and voices it feels like your phone is having a panic attack during the whole series. Or it's like a little flirting to quick cuts of the bear, that anxiety feel. You got the deal. The rest of the season's director is Dan Sackheim, Damon Thomas, Athalia Jones, and they all pick up that baton and run with it. So there's no, mix match or a patchwork of things. Now, here's where it gets personal, this story. The show comes from David Rosen, a writer with credits on Citadel, Sugar, and Hunters. Someone who clearly knows his way around genre premise. But the origin story isn't a pitch meeting. It is the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic. Or should I say, the pandemic. Well, Rosen has said that the idea came from watching his own wife during COVID-19. Juggling, everything women, and especially mothers, right? Quietly expected to juggle everything while the whole world shrank down to a screen during COVID-19. It was tough times. We all know, we all felt it, but especially working moms. That got him thinking about what he calls an epidemic of loneliness. The cruel joke of it is the following. The same technology that lets you video call your grandma and gets closer to her is also the same thing that quietly is making everyone feeling more alone. Out of that came Paula, our protagonist in this series. Yes, Paula. She is a single mom reaching for one small piece of connection through a screen every single night. And watching that one small reach in the screen kind of spirals into her own version of the movie Rear Window. Except instead of a courtyard and a window, she is staring into a webcam. There is a second inspiration too here. True crime internet sleuthing. Rosen has talked about his fascination with Reddit detectives who zoom into a blurry photo and somehow reverse engineer a country, then a city, then a street corner. Kind of those creepy people. Yes, he's obsessed with it. That obsessive amateur forensics energy is exactly what drives Paula once things go sideways completely. One more thing worth flagging here. This is a half-hour show per episode, and it is on purpose. Rosen said it straight up, and I kind of thought it was sweet from this open realization of it. He said he's getting older. He falls asleep during 2-hour prestige dramas, and he wanted to make something that he could actually finish. Something tight, no filler, weekly drops. In a TV landscape full of shows that mistake length for depth, that is a different bet here to have. Quick spoiler alert before you go further in this video. I am going to walk through the setup and a few key turns in this story. So if you want to go completely blind, pause here, come back after you watch the series, and then we'll talk more about it. So what is actually happening in this story? Paula Sanders is a fact checker at a magazine. You know, magazines, those things with paper that you flip through. Yes. She is recently divorced, locked in a custody battle over her daughter Hazel with her ex-husband Carl and his new wife Mallory. Work, court dates, PTA, she is stretched thin in every single direction. Poor Paula. Her one single outlet is every night a webcam model named Trevor, who has become for her something of, a fantasy and an actual lifeline of survival. Then, one day, mid-call, she watches Trevor get attacked and dragged off the screen. She calls the police, as a regular person would, right? Detective Sophia tells her it's almost certain a scam, so forget about it. This Acamboy stages this exact thing to extort lonely clients. Paula, come on, wake up. Case closed as far as the department is concerned. But Paula, she's relentless. She does not buy this. Fact-checking is her whole job. So that's what she's gonna do. She physically cannot let her unverified claim sit there. So she starts pulling threads herself and gets dragged into something way bigger than she could ever imagine. It is weirder and far more dangerous than, catfishing scheme that she thinks the detective is actually telling her she was on. One that eventually collides somehow with custody case and her daughter's youth soccer league. Yes, the show actually earns a logline with that crossing of worlds. Now let's talk about this cast. Leading it all is Tatiana Maslany as Paula. If you only know Maslany from Orphan Black, well, where she played a dozen distinct clones, often in the same scene, often talking to each other, you already know why she got this part. Paula is a character that has to be exhausted, furious, turned on, terrified, and funny, all sometimes within the same 30 seconds. She does it all. Most actors would snap in half for doing that, but Maslany makes it look like it's natural breathing for her. Opposite of her is Jake Johnson as Carl, her ex-husband. Johnson spent 7 seasons on New Girl playing a guy who's a mess but a lovable one. And I saw that same charming disaster energy is exactly what keeps Carl human in this series. He's not a cartoon villain X. He's just a guy Paula has to deal with at pickup for Hazel. Jessie Hodges plays Mallory. She is Carl's current wife, which is a role that could have been a stock new wife stereotype, but gets real space to complicate things a little bit. Dolly DeLeon, who you will remember from her breakout in Triangle of Sadness, plays Detective Sophia. She is the cop who doesn't believe Paula and slowly becomes her reluctant investigative partner anyway. John Michael Hill plays Detective Baxter. Brenton Flynn from 13 Reasons Why plays Trevor. He is the Acamboy at the center of this whole story, the one who keeps Paula company online every night. And that casting matters a lot because the entire emotional stakes of the show only works if we believe as spectators that Paula's attachment to him is real, not just a catchy thing about a lonely woman and her laptop. And then there is Murray Bartlett as Dennis. He is Trevor's boyfriend and one of the season's biggest wild cards here. I personally did not expect to see him in this series. If you know Bartlett from The White Lotus or The Last of Us, you know exactly what he's good at it. He's playing someone who can shift from completely charming to deeply unsettling inside one single scene. That is precisely the job that he has here in this series. As Paula's investigation goes deeper, Dennis turns into one of the show's shows real sources of danger here, and Bartlett is the reason those turns actually land on the screen. Rounding out Paula's world, we have Charlie Hall, Chiara Hamagami Goldberg as Paula's fact-checking co-workers, Rudy and Jerry, who function as, a comic relief as the audience built in skepticism with Paula's story. And I personally was always between hating them for most of the series and loving them for a little tiny bit of it. Lastly, we have Nola Wallace as Hazel, Paula's daughter. She is what brings Paula gravity in the plot. Now here is something that quietly elevates this above the standard, streaming thriller. They didn't fake the setting. Maximum Pleasure Guaranteed is set actually and filmed in Queens, New York. Production centered around Bliss Street and 43rd Avenue, with location work in Sunside and Astoria. No generic soundstage suburbia here. It is the real deal. Real storefronts, narrow sidewalks, actual apartment buildings that look like actual people live in them. Because, well, you know what? Actual people really do. Production later moved into Jersey City, including the Newport waterfront, giving Paula's quieter domestic scenes a dense, slightly rougher backdrop. Some sequences reached into Brooklyn as well. Small choice, big payoff. A story about a woman suffocating under her own life hits differently when the world around her looks genuinely worn in. It is not backlot shining thing. You believe Paula's exhaustion because her block looks exhausted too. The people around look exhausted. Now, layer that grounded location work under Green's visual style, tight close-ups, that overwhelming wall notification rings, those fast cuts and background chatter, and the show starts to feel like an anxiety attack you're watching from, the inside. Even in the funny parts, by the way. Well, especially in the funny parts. Let's talk about why this works specifically because Paula is a mother. Thrillers love the lone wolf investigator. Nothing to lose, nobody waiting at home, free to chase the mystery off a cliff. Paula is exactly the opposite of that. And it is the coolest structural choices this show makes, and one of the reasons why I personally love it. Every time she goes one step further down the rabbit hole, there is a custody hearing on the calendar. There is her daughter's soccer game she cannot miss. There is work. Then there is the ex-husband who would love nothing more than to use the unstable mother in front of a judge. The stakes here aren't the fate of the world. They're Hazel's, the daughter, and Paula as a mother. Rosen has described Paula's protective instinct as a raccoon energy. She will look ridiculous. She will make a scene. She does not care because Hazel comes first. Full stop. And that is it. It is not a save the world engine. It is a hold on to the one thing I cannot lose engine. It is mother energy. And that is exactly what makes this show feels emotionally real underneath the whole plot twists that you might face during it. Here's the detail that turns this from a fun premise into something sharper. Paula isn't just some woman who stumbles into a mystery. She is a professional fact checker. Her entire job is staying cool, contained, feathered to evidence and evidence only, while her personal life is actively burning, on fire. That contrast is the engine of the whole show. And Rosen has pointed out the timing of Paula as a character and the profession is not an accident in this show, by the way. And a sad note for all the hardcore journalists or appreciators out there, well, fact-checking as a profession is quietly disappearing from the newsrooms. Right as the very idea of agreed upon truth feels shakier than ever. So Paula's training becomes her actual survival skill. She treats the mystery around Trevor exactly like a suspicious source. She cross-references everything. She verifies. She checks it all. She rechecks it. She refused the easy answer the police hands exactly as it is to her. It is a neat bit of thematic doubling. A show about how hard it is to know what's real, led by a woman whose entire career is proving what is real. Nobody believes her. The editing is doing quiet, heavy lifting here. And I take this opportunity to give a shout out to this channel's editors, Mari, Carlinha, and Carol. Muito obrigada. So the editing is doing quiet, heavy lifting here. Half-hour episodes, weekly released. That means every single cut has to earn its place. We cannot lose time. There is no room for a scene that exists just, to pad the runtime. You will get a genuinely tense scene. Paula piecing together digital clues like amateur Reddit detective, and then the edit snaps you straight into something absurd and funny, and no seatbelt, no warning, just cut, cut, cut. That is a hard trick. Cut into the comedy too slowly and it feels like a whiplash. Cut too fast and you lose the tension entirely. The show threads that needle, episode after episode, which is a big part of why critics keep calling this show addictive. Nearly every episode ends on a cliffhanger, built to make your thumb hit next episode before your brain even weighs in. Thankfully, Apple TV has only dropped one episode by week. But for the record, it's not a cheap cliffhanger as it is I Will Find You of the Worlds. You know what I mean, right? So why does all this add up to something genuinely new? Well, because Maximum Pleasure Guaranteed refuses to pick a lane. It is not prestige thriller playing everything dead serious. It is not a straight comedy using crime as a scenery. It's both at the same time, held together by a lead performance strong enough to survive that split. Half-hour runtime, weekly release, real locations instead of a backlot, a fact checker as the detective. All of it points at the same idea. Take the DNA of a twisty domestic thriller and refuse to let it take itself too seriously for more than 5 minutes in a row. Okay, I could not finish this video without, addressing directly something because this show actually does. The inciting incident of the entire series is Paula's relationship with Acamboy, and Apple TV has quietly been on a bit of an internet sex work kick lately, and this landed not long after Margot's Got Money Problems, which is about a mom who starts an OnlyFans to cover childcare costs. Apparently somebody at Apple really wants to talk about this. I don't know, but I like it. But it's worth being precise about what this show actually does with the subject. Sex work here isn't the point. It is the catalyst. Trevor isn't a punchline. He isn't a scandal. The show frames Paula's connection to him as something closer to therapy with a charge running through it than actual, seduction. A stand-in for the real intimacy she isn't getting anywhere else. That's a more careful choice than it sounds on the paper. It doesn't moralize about Paula, and it doesn't flatten Trevor into a plot device. Where the show gets a bit shakier for me is the characters around Paula and in her world. It is actually her co-workers, and it's not something about the actors. They were written as a mildly scandalized in a way that can feel like the show wants it both ways. Provocative premise, slightly nervous execution. That is, from my perspective, a fair critic. But the central relationship of it all is the following. A lonely, overextended mother finding real comfort in something transactional and digital. That gets handled with more nuance than the title would ever suggest, right? A fact-checking single mom, a Acamboy conspiracy, a youth soccer league somehow tanked into a murder plot, a child custody fight, colleagues who you can't figure it out if they are your friends or your enemies or your frenemies. On paper, Maximum Pleasure Guaranteed sounds like it should not work, but that's exactly why it does. If you want more breakdowns like this, subscribe, hit the bell, leave a comment, give some love. I will see you in the next one. Ciao, ciao!